The bridge of the United Earth ship Defiant was silent as hyperspace peeled away around them. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center, hands clasped behind his back, as the swirling blue tunnel of faster-than-light travel dissolved into a canvas of stars. They had arrived. The Kepler 442 system, a world humanity had listened to for centuries. A world that had whispered across the void through radio signals, a world that promised, perhaps, to be humanity's first friend among the stars. The mission was supposed to be simple. Say hello. Shake hands across light years. Show that Earth had finally stepped into the galactic community. But simple things in the universe rarely remain simple. Jake's eyes moved across his crew, faces trained, professional, but with an undercurrent of nervous excitement. Lieutenant Amy Patterson, barely in her 20s, sat at the weapons station, her fingers moving nervously across her console. Commander Ben Wright, chief engineer, a man who treated every bolt and circuit like family. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes, second in command, sharp and steady, the best officer Jake had ever worked beside. And at communications, Ensign Chris Turner, his voice trembling slightly as he monitored signals. It was Turner who broke the silence. "Contact, sir," he said, his tone almost reverent. "Multiple ships approaching. Very large ships." Jake stepped toward the central display. The screen shifted, and the breath left his lungs. The alien vessels emerged from the void like moving stars. They were not ships as humanity understood them. They were colossal, crystalline titans, structures the size of small moons, refracting light in ways that bent reality itself. There were not one, not two, but dozens of them. Turner's voice wavered. 47, sir. And the lead ship, it's transmitting. On screen, Jake ordered. The moment the transmission opened, it was not sound that struck them first, but pressure. A wave that pressed against their minds, a voice that bypassed ears and language and spoke directly to their souls. "Mortals," the voice declared, resonant and terrible, "you stand before the celestial dominion. I am High Deity Zarthal, and these are my divine brothers. Kneel before your creators." The bridge dissolved into chaos, not physical, but spiritual. Crew members fell to their knees as if their strings had been cut. Tears streamed down Patterson's face. Ben Wright whispered prayers to gods he had never believed in. Even Lisa Hayes, unshakable Lisa, dropped to the deck with hollow eyes, as if gazing into paradise. The weight pressed into Jake's own mind. It was blissful, seductive, commanding him to kneel, to surrender, to believe. But Jake Morrison had survived the Titan Wars. He had seen men slaughter each other for scraps of metal and water. He had learned then that power wrapped in the language of faith was the most dangerous power of all. His knees shook, but he forced himself to remain standing. "This is Captain Morrison of the United Earth ship Defiant," he said, his voice ragged but steady. "We come in peace, seeking diplomatic contact." Laughter filled the bridge. Not cruel in sound, but cruel in spirit, like a choir of angels mocking the living. "Peace?" Zarthal echoed. "You speak as if you have a choice. Your species will serve us, as all species do. You will worship, and we will shape your evolution as we see fit." Turner, blood dripping from his nose as he fought the pressure, gasped out, "Sir, their energy readings, impossible. Nothing in our databases compares. They're beyond comprehension." The alien voice returned, dripping with condescension. "Tell me, mortal captain, do you still cling to your primitive religions? Do you pray to absent gods? Soon, you will know the joy of worshipping gods who are real, gods who reward, gods who punish. Prepare to receive our messengers. Resist, and your world will burn." Jake's stomach turned cold. Earth, billions of lives, his wife Sarah, his children, all blind to what approached them. "You will transmit the coordinates of your home world," Zarthal commanded. "Submit, and your species will live as honored servants. Refuse, and you will serve as corpses." Jake glanced around his bridge. His crew were husks, enthralled. Only he and Chris Turner remained resisting, and Chris looked ready to collapse. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "One of your hours," Zarthel said. "Pray to whatever gods you believe in. You will learn soon enough they were never real." The transmission ended. The crushing psychic weight eased slightly. Slowly, dazed crew members staggered back to their feet, but their eyes were not their own. Jake leaned toward Chris. "Can you get a message to Earth?" "Yes. But it'll take weeks through standard channels." "Send it anyway. Tell them what we've seen. Tell them, the gods are real, and they're coming." Jake sank into his chair, a man carrying the weight of an entire species. In less than an hour, he would decide whether humanity bent the knee to alien gods, or perished in fire. Either way, humanity's age of independence was over. The only question that remained was whether his species would survive the next dawn. Beneath the ruins of what was once Houston, Texas, hidden far below shattered concrete and rusting steel, a lab flickered with cold light. Dr. Elena Rodriguez adjusted her glasses, her hands trembling as she scanned the cascading data on the holoscreen. Her team had been awake for 3 days straight, not because they wanted to be, but because they had no choice. The gods had arrived. And humanity's clock was running out. Above, cities bent their knees. Nations surrendered without firing a shot. The voices of the celestial dominion reached into minds across the globe, twisting faith into chains. And yet, here, in the shadows, humanity whispered a different prayer. Not to the gods above, but to themselves. To resistance. Elena's assistant, a young man named Carter, pointed to the screen. "The readings are consistent, Doctor. Every time their ships pulse, we see the same spike. A resonance pattern, too clean to be natural." Elena leaned closer, her heart pounding. For weeks they had been dissecting fragments of alien transmissions, searching for flaws. The celestial dominion presented itself as divine, infinite, flawless, eternal. But perfection often carried cracks. "This isn't divinity," Elena whispered. "It's engineering. Advanced, yes. Beyond anything we've seen. But it follows rules. And if it follows rules, it can be broken." Carter swallowed. "You're saying, they're not gods. They're gods only because we believe they are. Strip away the theater, the psychic projection, the manipulation of quantum fields, and they bleed like anything else." But knowing the truth and surviving the truth were not the same. Meanwhile, aboard the carrier UNS Resolute, Admiral Jonathan Stone stood on the observation deck, staring out at a sky filled with alien light. The Dominion had made Earth a theater. Ships the size of continents hovered above major cities, casting shadows that stretched for miles. Statues of crystalline giants descended into public squares, preaching obedience in voices too beautiful to resist. And yet Stone's eyes were not filled with awe. They were filled with calculation. Lisa Hayes, the officer who had survived the Defiant, now stood at his side. Her voice was low, steady, but touched with bitterness. "They don't need weapons. Just presence. Look at them, people fight to kneel faster. Some are already calling them saviors." Stone folded his hands behind his back. "The Dominion isn't here to save. They're here to harvest." Hayes turned sharply. "Harvest?" He nodded grimly. "Dr. Rodriguez's team has been digging into the data. Every civilization they encounter collapses the same way. Worship first. Servitude next. And then. And then." Stone's voice was cold. "They vanish. Entire species disappear from history. No records, no traces. Just silence." Hayes felt the weight settle in her chest. It wasn't conquest. It was erasure. "They want us to kneel," Stone continued, because kneeling blinds us to what they're really doing. But we won't kneel. Not yet. He turned to face her, his eyes burning with the quiet fire of defiance. Captain Morrison bought us time. Rodriguez has found a crack in their armor. If we strike right, if we move fast enough, humanity might not just survive. We might remind the galaxy that gods can die. Back in the underground lab, Elena's discovery grew clearer by the hour. Every god's voice, every psychic command, originated from a core structure within their crystalline bodies. A lattice woven from quantum-entangled nodes. To human eyes, it looked like something between a brain and a cathedral. But unlike a brain, it wasn't infinite. It wasn't divine. It was a machine. If we can disrupt the entanglement, Elena explained to Stone over a secure channel, their psychic hold shatters. They'll lose their grip on us, maybe even on themselves. Stone's reply was terse. What do you need? Time. Power. And a ship close enough to strike the lattice directly. Stone exhaled slowly. You'll have all three. But Hayes shook her head. Admiral, that's suicide. One ship against a god. Stone looked out at the alien armada blotting out the stars. Better one ship dies free than a world lives on its knees. As the weeks bled into each other, Earth became a planet of two faces. On the surface, people bowed and sang hymns to their crystalline overlords. In the shadows, soldiers, scientists, and rebels prepared for the unthinkable. The Dominion thought humanity broken. But what they could not see, what they had never understood, was that humans did their best thinking in the dark. Elena Rodriguez, exhausted and hollow-eyed, stood before her team one night and declared what none dared to speak aloud. We're not fighting for victory. Not yet. We're fighting for the chance to fight again. For the right to choose our fate. If we can kill even one god, the myth dies with it. Her words spread like sparks through hidden channels, whispered from bunker to bunker, from rebel cell to rebel cell. The Dominion's power was vast, their beauty intoxicating, their presence unbearable. But humans had always carried a flaw that gods despised. They refused to stay conquered. On the day of the first strike, the UNS Resolute descended into the black gulf of space, its hull cloaked and its engines running silent. Inside, Hayes stood at her station, her jaw tight. Rodriguez's weapon, a crude, improvised disruptor, was wired into the ship's core. If it worked, it would sever a god's lattice. If it failed, the ship would burn in silence, forgotten. Stone's voice cut across the bridge. Target locked. Zarthel himself. If we're going to make a statement, let it be against their highest throne. Hayes felt her throat tighten. Against the very god who had spoken to Captain Morrison. The god who demanded Earth's submission. The order came down like steel. Fire. The disruptor pulsed. Space bent. And for the first time since their arrival, a god screamed. The Dominion's voice fractured across the stars, not divine, not eternal, but raw, animal, filled with pain. Cracks split across Zarthel's crystalline form, light bleeding like blood into the void. Across Earth, millions of humans staggered awake, freed for a heartbeat from psychic chains. For that single moment, humanity saw the truth. The gods were not gods. They were tyrants. And tyrants could fall. But the scream did not end. It echoed across the Dominion fleet, carrying fury and terror in equal measure. Other gods turned their gaze toward Earth, their light sharpening into spears. Stone gripped the rail of his command chair, his face grim. We've woken the hive, he muttered. Now they'll come for us all. Hayes stared into the dark between the stars, her pulse hammering in her ears. For the first time in her life, she was not afraid of gods. She was afraid of what humanity might have just unleashed. Zarthel's scream still echoed in the void. It was not the song of a god, nor the command of a king. It was the death cry of a creature that believed itself immortal, now discovering mortality in real time. On the bridge of the UNS Resolute, silence reigned. The crew stared at the holoscreens as the impossible unfolded, cracks spreading across the crystalline body of a being worshipped as eternal. The glow within him stuttered, dimmed, and finally, collapsed into darkness. Admiral Stone let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His voice, when it came, was quiet. Mark it down. Today, a god has died. But no one cheered. Because the stars themselves seemed to shudder. On Earth, the effect was immediate. For generations, human religions had told of divine beings, of miracles, of gods who bent the world to their will. And now, in a single broadcast, the galaxy had seen one such being fall. In plazas where statues of crystal once stood, worshippers collapsed in confusion, their faith unraveling. Soldiers of the Dominion staggered as their psychic chains fractured. And rebels hidden in the ruins of old cities whispered the same phrase again and again. If one can die, all can die. Yet what humans felt as hope, the rest of the galaxy felt as horror. For across the stars, countless civilizations had already fallen to the Dominion. To them, the gods were unshakable, eternal forces of nature. Seeing Zarthel's corpse drifting in orbit was not liberation. It was blasphemy. It was terror. The galaxy trembled, not because a god was dead, but because the illusion was broken. In her underground lab, Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in stunned silence, watching the resonance data flatten into stillness. She had done the impossible, proved the lattice was mortal, the divine an elaborate machine. But victory was a bitter taste on her tongue. Admiral, she whispered through the comms, you've shown the galaxy the truth. But do you understand what comes next? Stone's voice was iron. Retaliation. She nodded slowly. The Dominion won't just come for Earth. They'll come for the idea of Earth. For the heresy that gods can bleed. Her assistant Carter, pale and shaking, muttered, we've doomed ourselves. Rodriguez looked at him with something between sorrow and pride. No. We've doomed the lie. The response came swiftly. Within hours, more crystalline titans descended from orbit. Cities burned. Skies split with light. Humanity's rebellion, once a whisper, became a scream of defiance. Ships launched from hidden bases, guerrilla fighters struck convoys, and ordinary people tore down statues with their bare hands. The Dominion, for the first time in eons, faced resistance it could not silence with beauty, nor crush with awe. Because resistance was contagious. From distant stars, whispers traveled. The humans killed a god. On worlds long enslaved, the phrase spread like wildfire. On moons where alien children had never known freedom, the story sparked questions. And in the Dominion's own council, voices of crystalline gods trembled with doubt. The myth had cracked. And through that crack, light poured in. Yet even as the fires of rebellion spread, something darker stirred. Lisa Hayes, standing once again at Stone's side, reviewed intercepted transmissions from a neutral species known as the Harari. Their words were cryptic, laced with unease. You have pulled back the curtain too far. The gods were never the end. They were only keepers. Custodians of a greater design. And now the architects will awaken. Hayes frowned. Architects? Stone studied the message in silence. In his long years of command, he had faced warlords, alien fleets, even the Dominion itself. But the Harari spoke with a fear he had never heard before. Rodriguez joined the call, her face pale on the holoscreen. Admiral, what if the gods weren't rulers? What if they were guardians? Shackles on something worse? The question hung in the air like a blade. Weeks passed. Zarthel's body drifted as frozen wreckage in the void, a monument to defiance. Around it, Dominion ships gathered like vultures, unwilling to touch but unable to look away. Earth rebuilt in the shadows, gathering allies from those bold enough to stand. But the skies remained dangerous, every dawn a reminder that vengeance was coming. Stone often stood alone on the Resolute's deck, staring at the silent corpse of the god they had slain. He knew it was not triumph. It was invitation. The Dominion's wrath would be merciless. But worse still was the question gnawing at his mind: if the gods were only custodians, what, exactly, had they been guarding against? The answer came in fragments. Strange signals bleeding through quantum space. Echoes too vast, too ancient, for even Dominion minds to comprehend. Rodriguez was the first to recognize it: patterns within patterns, architecture built into the very laws of physics. "This isn't communication," she whispered to Carter, her voice hollow. "It's design. Someone built the framework of reality. And the Dominion, the gods, they were just tenants in a house not their own." Carter swallowed. "And the architects?" Her eyes met his, wide with dread. "The landlords." Humanity's first victory had been a crack in the dam. Hope surged. Resistance flared. But in the dark between the stars, something older than gods stirred. The galaxy had always whispered of myths. Humanity had always sought gods. But soon, both would learn a truth far colder. Gods can fall. But architects endure.